The most wonderful time of the year is upon us once again. It's football season, baby. For better or for worse, all 32 teams have the opportunity to go out there and set the tone for the upcoming season with their performance in Week 1. Today, we're going to break down, predict, and analyze every single matchup in the Week 1 slate, as well as every single week in general for this entire season. So if you want to stay up to date with all the most recent news and most important conversations that we need to be having about football, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Let's get started. To begin a new year, the Kansas City Chiefs, the defending Super Bowl champions, back-to-back Super Bowl champions, take on the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday Night Football. A rematch of the AFC Championship where the Baltimore Ravens have an opportunity to be the hungrier team, to get revenge for last year and start this season off exactly how they need to continue to be a Super Bowl contender. Now, are they going to be able to do it? I don't think they are, personally. Even though Detroit showed us just how good it can be to be a hungry team in the scenarios, I have the Chiefs winning for two reasons in this one. One is that their offense is not nearly as unclear and messed up as it was at the beginning of last year. Rashee Rice is a more developed talent. They drafted Xavier Worthy, who could be an instant plug-and-play deep threat player, and you brought back Juju Smith-Schuster. There's no Kadarius Toney to throw the game away, and Isaiah Pacheco is a far more developed player as well, so that run game is going to be a lot more reliable. And I also think the Chiefs are going to win up front in the war of attrition on the defensive side of things, as the Ravens' offensive line is not what it was last year. They lost some pretty key pieces, and there's questions on how they're going to hold up and if they'll give Lamar and Derrick Henry the time they need to make big splash plays. If you take away the Ravens' run game, it is really hard for them to get wins against tough opponents like this. I think the Chiefs are going to control up front, and eventually their offense is going to break through to win what I think will probably end up being a pretty low-scoring affair between two solid defenses. That said, let's move on to the first ever NFL Friday night game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. Pretty interesting situation here. It's a revamped Eagles team versus a Packers team that people are feeling pretty optimistic about. I, for one, favor the Eagles. I think they probably should come out on top in this game, but it definitely feels like a trap matchup of sorts because this Packers team is on the rise, and that Eagles secondary, although is improved, has a lot of rookies who could get exposed early on in their careers against a Pack offense that is developing at a pretty fast rate. If the Pack have their way early and the Eagles get off to a slow start, Green Bay may just run away with this. But I believe that the Eagles will get the W in the end, just because I think they're going to control the time of possession, and the Packers offense won't be able to keep up because they'll just be cold. Last year, they were not good against the run. Things could be different this year, but there's only so much you can change thanks to your personnel situation. And the Eagles happen to have one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the league, who's finally fully healthy and is probably going to use his legs to his advantage, and a brand new superstar-level running back in Saquon, who is very motivated now that he's playing exactly where he wants to, and he's getting the contract that he desired. I think him and Jalen Hurts are going to be a problem all night. They're going to control the clock and the tempo of this game, and the Eagles are going to win this in a simple by-the-book W. Now for the Sunday 1 o'clock slate, where we start with the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Atlanta Falcons. This one's interesting. The Falcons, they have a lot to look forward to now that they have an actual quarterback at hand, but at the same time, they are a very cursed franchise, and that Steelers defense is going to be a nightmare to deal with. We've seen it so many times throughout the years. That Pitt defense carries them and keeps them in these ugly games, and that's where I feel like this game is trending towards. But the problem is that the Steelers may not be able to put up enough points for it to really matter, hence why I am picking the Falcons to win this game. They may have changed the offensive coordinator and they have some new quarterbacks at hand, but do any of them really inspire enough confidence just knowing what the Steelers have on offense in general? I just don't think it does. It'll probably be that classic Steelers low-scoring, ugly game, but when it comes down to it, the Falcons are going to have their drives at some point. There's a bit too much talent on that team for it to not happen. They're going to get their threes here and there, maybe find the end zone once or twice, and that should be more than enough to beat a Pittsburgh team that still has so many questions on offense. Next up is the Buffalo Bills versus the Arizona Cardinals, and I believe this game will be closer than a lot of fans expect it to be. Buffalo didn't have the greatest offseason, and there's a good chance that with where this team stands right now, they're going to have a lot more struggles compared to recent years, and they may be in some closer games than you'd anticipate, like with this one. Defensively, their secondary feels very weak. There's an opportunity for a resurgent Kyler Murray plus Marvin Harrison Jr. to have an immediate impact and for them to put up a lot of points against this team. And on the other side of it, the Bills still have so much to figure out with offense and finding a new identity with their pass game now that it's changed so much. This team needs to perform under a lot of pressure, and the Cardinals don't have much to worry about at all, and that could lead to an uncomfortably close matchup. However, I'ma still stick with the Buffalo Bills to win this game, just because their team is a lot further along. The Cardinals really aren't that great still. They have a lot of doubts to get through, and you'd expect a Bills team with that experience to get the key stops when they need to, and if it comes down to a high-scoring affair, you're going to put all of your faith in the better quarterback, the more elite one in Josh Allen. It won't be pretty, it'll be uncomfortable, but I think Buffalo will survive. Next up, we got the Chicago Bears versus the Tennessee Titans. The debut of Caleb Williams. A new era in Chicago has begun, and I think it's going to start exactly how all of their fans would hope. I don't know if they could have asked for a better opponent for Caleb to start off on the right foot in his career. The Titans, in my opinion, are a disaster, and they'll be one of the bottom teams in the league. They're still trying to figure out who they are with Will Levis as their quarterback as they tread towards this new direction, and I don't have all that much confidence in him personally, and I think this Bears pass rush showed some great progress last year, and they'll make his life a nightmare. Without Derrick Henry there to bail him out, he's sure to make some mistakes, and he's going to give in to the pressure. Now, it's not to say that this can't blow up in the Bears' face, because after all, they have a rookie quarterback also facing a lot of pressure, but I think the Bears have built themselves for success, and Caleb and all of the talented players on that offense are eventually going to break their way through. Even if they don't play great, I think Will Levis will give them a lot of opportunities to keep on putting up those points, and that'll lead to a pretty nice and easy Bears victory. Next up, the Patriots are on to Cincinnati, this time without Bill Belichick. And they couldn't have asked for a worse opponent in the first week of the year. A Bengals team that is locked and loaded, trying to get back to the Super Bowl. The Pats, to me and to many others, feel like one of the worst teams in the league. They're trying to rebuild and find out what they have and rediscover themselves, find a new identity in the post-Bill Belichick era, and with Jacoby Brissett under center for the time being, that doesn't exactly make you feel the most confident. He's not the greatest QB in the world, and honestly, I don't know who's a true threat in this passing offense in New England yet, which doesn't make me feel very good about them going up against a Bengals team that is so high-powered. Usually, the Patriots could get bailed out with a solid defense, but even that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. That group is getting less and less talented as time goes on, even to the point where they recently traded away Matthew Judon. Between a questionable offense and Joe Burrow possibly not facing much pressure at all, it leads me to believe the Bengals win this one pretty easily. Now, of course, there is the idea the Bengals get off to a slow start once again. Historically, that's been a trend with this group, but I think it's about time they break it against one of the worst teams they played against in recent memory in opening week. Next up, you've got an AFC South divisional matchup between the Colts and the Texans. Two quarterbacks of the future going head-to-head right off the bat. And I'll be blatantly honest, I heavily favor the Texans in this game. Division games are always tough, especially in week 1 as well. But the Texans have such high aspirations this year, and I doubt that Colts defense is going to have any answer. I don't know if any team in the NFL in general will have an answer for what we're going to witness in 2024. The only way the Colts have a serious chance in this one is if they can control the clock and the time of possession. If they can run the ball effectively with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor and keep that Texans offense off the field as much as humanly possible, they might just walk away with an upset here. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think their secondary is going to hold up against Stroud and the boys with the pass game. But on top of it all, I don't know if I trust Anthony Richardson to execute the game plan how they need it to be. I'm not all in on the Anthony Richardson hype train just yet. I've seen the flashes, there's reason to be optimistic, but he still feels like a rookie to me. I didn't get to watch him play that much last year. And in the time that I did, while there was some good, there's definitely some bad as well. And training camp, from what I hear, hasn't gone that great either. I'm worried that at some point he's going to fail with this game plan, be it a fumble or just a really terrible decision. And against the Texans, you just can't afford to let that happen. They're not going to let those opportunities you give them go to waste, because as a rookie, CJ Stroud already showed us he doesn't make a lot of bad choices. He's efficient with moving the football downfield, and I think that will ultimately be the difference and the reason the Texans get this win. They will assert their wills, by simply following the game plan and waiting for the Colts to mess up. Next up, the Miami Dolphins are hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars in a Florida battle. Let's be straight up, Miami usually do pretty well in these situations on that opening day, especially when it's in Miami, when the weather's nice at the beginning of September. This has a Miami W written all over it, and I think they're gonna win big, as I personally do not see a world where the Jaguars can contain that Dolphins offense. Their secondary is kind of suspect in my opinion, and against Tyreek and Jalen Waddle on opening day like this, that could be a real issue. Points will be flying for the Dolphins, and the Jaguars aren't that type of team. They're not designed to win in shootouts. It's very rare to see that happen with this particular group. They're not proven in those scenarios. They're not dominant enough. Don't get me wrong, there is upset room for the Dolphins early on in their schedule, just because they are getting some key playmakers back from defense still, recovering from injury. But again, the Jags don't feel like the type of team to totally capitalize on that. They don't have the offensive firepower needed to hang in there in a shootout, and they don't have the defense to keep this a low-scoring game, so give me Miami all the way. Next is another divisional matchup between the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. I don't know why the heck they keep making this a week 1 matchup, but here we are doing the same thing yet again, and yet again, I think you just have to go out there and pick the Saints. The Saints are a team that kind of feel like they're decaying and dying, and they really need to hit that reset button, but they're still in a far better position than a Panthers team that is young, unproven, and have so many questions that need to be answered, especially with that offense. Technically, after what we saw last year, it's going to be real hard to be worse, but that Saints defense still has some pretty good veterans on it. They actually drafted some good talent as well, and I think Bryce Young, as a quarterback that hasn't really done anything yet, will continue to struggle. The Saints coverage may really throw him off, and that'll be that, but do not be surprised if this ends up being a sloppy and painfully close matchup. As much as we don't trust the Panthers offense, you really can't feel that much better about the Saints. If anything, you probably feel worse after witnessing what we did in 2023. I get the feeling it'll be one of those games where the Saints win like 17-9, and they barely squeak it out just because of their defense alone. This game's going to be a snoozer, and I'm not looking forward to it. Closing out the 1 p.m. slots is the Minnesota Vikings versus the New York Giants. Oh man, Sam Darnold versus Daniel Jones, matchup of the century at quarterback here. Whoever comes to play and elevates themselves to maybe an average level is probably going to lead their team out of that arena with a W. And for me right now, I lean slightly towards the Vikings to win this game. It feels like a 50-50, could definitely go either way, but I think the Vikings have one key advantage, and that's the Giants' secondary. It is painfully below average this year. They got Adoree Jackson to try and help out, but there's still a lot of holes there, and even if Sam Darnold isn't the greatest, he might take advantage of that if Justin Jefferson is open like literally every play. But there could be an opening for the Giants to come out on top. It all depends on how that Vikings offensive line holds up against the fearsome trio of Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns. If the Giants D-line can be disruptive enough and force Sam Darnold to make quick decisions, then maybe he's going to see ghost out there like we've seen so many other times before. But just knowing the Giants, that probably won't happen. They never seem to be successful with these defensive plans these days. It's been like over a decade since they've been truly fearsome in that regard, so until I actually see the results on field, I'd like to believe the Vikings have the slight advantage here. I think Darnold and Jefferson have a good day, and the Giants' offense simply won't be able to keep up. They're very dysfunctional. There's no reason to trust Daniel Jones. The offensive line is new, and with a blitz-heavy Vikings defense, they could be really confused out there, and we could see the Giants' offense stagnate for like the entire game. So just knowing how they match up talent for talent, and how likely it is for that Giants secondary to suck, I feel slightly comfortable picking the Vikings, but definitely could go either way. Moving on to the 4 p.m. slots, we have the LA Chargers versus the Vegas Raiders. Another big-time divisional showdown right off the bat, and this one could go either way. I'm pretty excited about this one. It's a new era and a true fresh start for both sides. The Antonio Pierce era versus the Jim Harbaugh era. You've got a revamped defense for the Raiders, plus the addition of Gardner Minshew, and they're playing a Chargers team that's going to have a new identity with the run-heavy offense, and hopefully a better-looking defense now that Harbaugh is there. A lot of room for things to go right or terribly wrong as these teams figure out what they have. This game could go either way, but I'm actually going with the road team in this situation. I'm picking the Raiders to get an upset in week 1, and it's because of one specific advantage. I think that this is a bad matchup for the Chargers with their offensive game plan. With Jim Harbaugh there, it's all about the power running and dominating up front with the offensive line, and I don't know if that's possible going up against a Raiders team that has Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins now as well. The explosive runs and the short yardage situations may not always go their way. I get the feeling Crosby and Wilkins will be very disruptive. They won't be able to stick to the script that they want, and that's going to cause a lot of issues that throws this entire team off. Justin Herbert is elite, and he might make some plays happen anyway to get this win. It's a realistic possibility, but right now with how unproven that receiver room feels, I don't know if I trust it. I don't know if I trust them over the Raiders guys to come down with those 50-50 balls when it matters to turn the tide of the game. The Raiders feel slightly more suited for a scenario like that, even though I don't love their offense either. At least they have guys like Devontae and Jacoby Myers who can make something out of nothing. And let's not forget that this Chargers defense probably still has a long way to go, even with Harbaugh there. So I think for the time being, the Raiders are a bit more of a safe pick, so I'll be going with them on the road. Next up, the Denver Broncos travel to Seattle yet again for some reason to play the Seattle Seahawks. There's no Russell Wilson this time around. Instead, it's going to be all on Bo Nix in his very first game as a starter, and I don't know how I feel about that. A rookie in his first game who probably shouldn't be starting this early on, playing against a Seattle defense that is low-key a little bit underrated. These are the types of situations where you get your true welcome to the NFL moment, and I think with the lack of talent the Broncos have, he's certainly going to be facing it. Now, it's not to say this game still can't be close, because Denver's defense definitely isn't bad, and I'm not a big fan of Seattle's current offensive line, but eventually you know they're going to break through. They're going to have a bunch of chances as the Broncos offense struggles, and eventually they will slowly but surely amount a lead that is just too much for the Broncos to come back from, and that'll be that. I'm going with the Seahawks to get a W over a young team that just doesn't have a true direction yet. At one of the 425 slots, the Dallas Cowboys play the Cleveland Browns. I'll just say it, I think the Cowboys win this one pretty easily. As scary as that Browns defense may be, I don't trust their offense in the slightest. Deshaun Watson has yet to show me that he can be a good quarterback again since joining the Cleveland Browns, and why the heck would I think otherwise? What reason is there to believe that this is going to be the year for change, especially when he's facing the likes of Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons? If they had a healthy Nick Chubb, this could be a lot better for them, just because the Cowboys' linebacking core is in shambles, but they may not be able to totally rely on that run game, and I think because of that, they're going to be a little too one-dimensional, and the Cowboys just walk away with this one pretty easily. Cleveland are going to get some stops, but there's too much talent on this Dallas team for them to not eventually score some points, and I get the feeling the Browns won't be scoring many of much at all, so that'll be that. Maybe won't be the prettiest game, but Dallas just has more talent and a more reliable quarterback. At the other 425 slot, Washington versus Tampa Bay. A real upset could be in the works here. Tampa still feel like virtually the same team, and you never know what might happen with Baker Mayfield in his second season here, and they're playing a Commanders team that looks a whole lot different compared to last year. Defensively, they'll change because of their coaching. You've got a new exciting quarterback prospect. You brought in a ton of free agents as well. This Commanders team feels like night and day compared to last year. Now, is it going to be enough to get this W? That's the real question. It could go a couple of different ways. If the Commanders want to win, I think Jaden Daniels needs to get into a good rhythm early on to establish his confidence, get into a rhythm passing to Terry McLaurin, maybe find some success on the ground game, and wear out a Bucs defense that is getting older by the season. That is the ideal scenario for this Commanders team, and it is very doable. But I personally like the Bucs a little more in this one. For me, it comes down to that I think Baker is going to have a lot of time to throw in this game. That Commanders D-line still lacks a soul in my opinion. I'm not convinced they'll be all that great at generating pressure after the trades they made last year, and their secondary still isn't anything out of this world either, which could result in Baker, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin having a pretty good day. And if we're being real with ourselves, while that defense is getting older, they still are very good vets They have good heads on their shoulders, and they know how to read rookies, and I think they'll do a good job of providing some of those welcome to the NFL moments for Jaden Daniels, just enough to the point where the Bucs can sneak away with a win. This game might be scarily close, but I do favor Tampa Bay. Then for primetime, Sunday night, a rematch of the NFC wildcard round, Detroit hosting the LA Rams. Love how both teams feel this year, have a lot of optimism. Both offenses are likely to put up some good points in this matchup, but the Lions hold one huge advantage that I think gets them this dub relatively easily. And that's the fact that their run game is going to be very successful in this matchup. The two-headed monster of Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs no longer has to worry about Aaron Donald being disruptive up front in the middle. The amount of wide open holes is going to be absolutely insane. There's not going to be all those drawing double teams. They can be so much more creative with their offensive game plan, and I think it'll be to the point where the Rams defense gets worn out beyond repair and the Lions control time of possession totally in their favor. For a while, this game could be pretty close. The Rams are capable of putting up some big points early on, super quickly, but as time goes on, and we see that shift change with the Rams defense getting super tired, that's when the Lions are going to take advantage. And now that Aaron Donald is gone, the Lions feel a bit more inclined to make that key stop in any kind of shootout scenario, especially because they have Aiden Hutchinson on their side. So I think the Lions win by like 7 or maybe 10. And finally, on Monday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers makes his return to the field as the Jets play the 49ers. Maybe this year he can play more than one drive, am I right? Well, let's pray at least, because it's not going to be easy. I genuinely believe this game may not be all that close. It could be a serious wake-up call for Jets fans worldwide. I think this team is very good, and they'll be capable of being a playoff contender come January, but obviously, that offensive line is still not fantastic. They made some improvements, but there's still a bunch of holes there, and I'm concerned about how much time Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball against the Niners D-line that is pretty nasty. Maybe not as good as it was last year, but you still got to worry about Nick Bosa and Leonard Floyd, who hurt you last year, for crying out loud. I believe it's going to be a rough day in the office for that Jets offense. They'll struggle big time, and they'll fail to put up a lot of points as they just can't stay on the field. The Jets defense is going to do all they can, but in a similar fashion to what we've seen in previous years with Zach Wilson, they'll just tire out over time, and the Niners, with all those playmakers, will take advantage and win a game a bit more easily than we'd hope. I'm praying to be wrong. I'm hoping to see some good Rodgers to Garrett Wilson action in this matchup, but it just doesn't pass the vibes for me. I'm all in on San Francisco. And that's my general consensus for how the Week 1 games go and my picks for all those matches. Let me know what you think down in the comments below and who you're rolling with and what games you're looking forward to the most now that football season is back down in the comments below. And of course, be sure to like this video and subscribe as well so you don't miss out on any of my future NFL content.